Ever tried to give feedback and it completely backfired? Let's fix that. Nearly 7 in 10 employees said they'd work harder if their efforts were really appreciated. But giving feedback can feel tricky and it can feel awkward, especially when emotions are involved. Hi, I'm Kathy Doherty, the People Navigator, and if you run a small business or manage a small team, you're in the right place. Today we'll cover how to give feedback that's honest but still respectful, and how to avoid the common mistakes that can make things worse. I've seen it. When giving feedback, keep in mind you're not trying to fix the person. You're trying to help them be more successful, with the knock-on effect that then helps you be more successful and the business be more successful. Feedback is about growth. It's about development, but it can be easy to go off track. Choose your timing. The worst time to give feedback when something has gone wrong, so we're dealing with things haven't gone quite to plan, which might be an understatement. Don't give that feedback in the moment. That is a reaction rather than a response. And quite often at that time, things are quite highly stressful. There's a lot of emotion happening. There's also not a lot of listening going on. And it's very difficult in that kind of environment to give feedback in a dignified way. It's also super important not to give any type of negative feedback in front of other people, because that can be humiliating. Not just for you, not just for the individual, but for the people around them who are observing it. Instead of doing it in the moment, choose a quieter time when you're both calm and you can have a properly constructive conversation, a two-way conversation that is about improvement, development, growth. And to do that, you're going to need to plan. Lead that conversation, lead your whole approach with curiosity. Open with more broad questions rather than an accusation. You could start with, can I just check on something that I noticed when that was happening? Can we have a conversation about, I noticed this and I don't understand? You're wanting to invite a conversation rather than shutting things down and putting the individual on the defensive. You will not get anywhere once the defenses are raised. It's a wasted time, a wasted conversation if you begin effectively on the attack. This whole conversation for you is about growing your insights, your understanding as to how that person thinks. The more you can understand that, the better it will be for you in terms of spotting where it all went wrong, or what was in their control and what was out with their control. Without finding that out, you will jump to conclusions, and the individual won't have an opportunity to be heard, and therefore the whole thing will not feel as it is intended as a point of growth, development to help them succeed, which in turn will make your life easier if they grow as an individual and they don't repeat mistakes. As part of your planning for this conversation, you will need to be specific and behaviour focused. This is important because you don't want it to come across that you're attacking their character. Again, that will raise defences, it will close ears, they will not be listening and will not take anything on board, and their opinion of you will plummet, and it'll be difficult to get that reputation back, to get that relationship back, which then doesn't feel good for you. Describe exactly what happened from your understanding. Focus on the facts and less on the feelings. For example, somebody who's been late, and you say to them, instead of "you're unreliable," which feels like a personal attack, a character attack, and doesn't really give anything specific, it's a bit vague, you can say, you've been late 3 times this week. Is there a reason why? Are there circumstances I need to be aware of? Has something happened? You begin the conversation. Then you can evolve that conversation into, how do you think that is impacting on the business, on your team, on your colleagues around you? And you begin shifting their thinking from, oh, well, I was only a wee bit late. What's the big deal? Is you begin encouraging them to think about the impact of their actions. The more somebody can understand the impact of their actions, the bigger why you're even having the conversation in the first place, the better it is for you and the individual, because that's then when true growth comes. But also you're giving them the opportunity to improve themselves, to think about their colleagues. They are being given every opportunity to improve their own behaviour, their own approach. Nothing is being kept from them. You're giving them the information, and then you can have a conversation about, what do we do about it? And try to balance it out. Now, I would guard against using things like the praise sandwich, if you've ever heard of it. The concept, which is usually poorly executed, is you give somebody something positive, a positive piece of information. You then talk about the issue, and then you finish with some sort of positive encouragement. The reason I would tend to guard against doing that or using that as a model is because what happens is, generally people, we don't really like confrontation. So when it comes to, you give the positive, you skip over the issue, and then you move on to the encouragement. So you don't give enough weight to the filling, to the issue, the whole reason for having the conversation. But also people will naturally select the most recent part of the conversation. That's what they walk away with. And that's the bit of encouragement or positive. It's not necessarily what the issue was. And it can muddy the waters. It can create confusion. And also the fact that we do tend to try and shy away from that type of, any kind of negativity or confrontation for so many reasons, is that it can be lost. That whole message is lost because you're not giving it enough focus. Because you're giving into that part of you that wants to avoid the confrontation and just skip over the bit in the middle, which is the important part. And this is where planning of what you want to cover really helps, because you get more comfortable with why you're going to address it, the grounds, the facts, that you're more sure of yourself, but also you can explain it with greater clarity. And then the end of the conversation is then about the steps that we have agreed in order to deal with that. And people can tell when you're not telling them everything, and they can tell when you're trying to sugarcoat it. This is why I would suggest doing your planning, being very clear, and avoid the praise sandwich. The key aspect of this is to follow up. Don't just leave it lingering. Don't just think that, we've had the conversation, that's us done. The follow-up is key. It reinforces that there was a whole reason behind having that conversation, that it mattered, that the issue mattered, that the improvement of whatever the behaviour approach, whatever that was, is important because you had the conversation. So it was important enough that you had to have the conversation. But make sure you have the follow-up to reinforce, but also to see, does the individual need any more assistance? How are they getting on with what you agreed coming out of that conversation? What progress are they making? Which then also says to them that it is about their progress. It's not about penalty. And you're not focusing on faults. You're focusing on their development, their improvement. Make sure you schedule that follow-up. Don't just leave the conversation and say, oh, we'll have a follow-up at some point. Get it in the diary, whether it be a week later, a month later, make sure it happens. And obviously, the more serious the requirement is, you're going to want to factor that in terms of how realistic is it for them to do what they need to do, or for them to put in practice. Or I would ask them also to reflect, have a reflection moment in terms of why they did it and how they're not going to, or how they're going to address it, or get them to reflect in terms of what that situation was. The more that you can instill reflection in your team, the easier all of this will be, and the easier it will be for you in future to give feedback, especially without offending anyone. Try using this approach next time something comes up. You might be surprised at how well it's received. What's your biggest feedback challenge? Share it in the comments. See you next time.